Tree Talking Time is brought to you by Conkey's Outdoors. Get all your hound hunting needs at conkeys.com. Welcome to Tree Talking Time, where we talk all things tree dogs, from the smallest fights to the largest hounds, treating squirrels to bears and everything in between. And from time to time, we might even run a little fast game.
I've been blessed with some awful good hunts, over the last 40 plus years. I've really had some good times and then been blessed to see things that a lot of people hadn't been able to see. But when I started looking back over my hunting career and stuff, I guess the most memorable hunt that I've ever had was here a couple of years ago. I took I had my son and daughter and their spouses and my wife and all 5 of my grandchildren, and we went coon hunting and walked into a tree.
That's pretty special.
Yeah, and then to think that that many generations of hunters will go into the tree and to watch those kids walk, and I videotaped it and took pictures and walked into the tree, and they petted on my dog, and the dog was treeing, and I looked at the tree and saw the old coon sitting up in a big tree, and man, I just stood back and just thought back over the years. It was kind of like 40 years of coon hunting went up in one instance at a tree. I thought about the first time that I went to the tree, and I thought about, man, this has kind of come a full circle here. This is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. That is pretty cool. Most people can't say, even people that hunt with their family, to have all your kids, all your grandkids, your wife, your whole family there to go coon hunting together. That's pretty special.
Yeah, it was, we try to get the grandkids out, but that night we cooked out and had cooked hot dogs and had food and drinks and coffee and built a big fire and man, just sitting around and the kids asking me questions about hunting and petting on my dogs, and it was a special night. It really was.
Yeah, for sure. Now, who were you hunting that night?
I was hunting at that time. I was hunting a little black and tan female. Little black and tan female. It was. I know you've heard of Tam Young, and she's a Tam Young Wheeler bred dog that was out of his stock of dogs. Went back to his stock of dogs, and
okay.
And it was an older female, and I had other dogs, but I carried her. She was just an older dog, and I figured I would have a better hunt and not get out of pocket, with all those kids and stuff. And
yep.
The little dog done exactly what she was supposed to do.
That's awesome. So, well, Mr. Jimmy, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, my name is Jimmy Weaver. I'm 61 years old. Figure to be 62 in May, and I've been coon hunting since the mid to late 70s. I don't remember the exact year, probably around 77, somewhere in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I've been coon hunting for a long time, and I worked as a police officer from the time I was 19 up until 25 years ago, and then I just woke up one day and decided that I was through policing. I was real active with dogs, even in the job. For the last 10 years that I was a police officer, I trained police canine. I was a handler, and I trained police canine. And then I just woke up one day and just decided that I was ready to do something else, and I took an early retirement out, and now I work in maintenance and in a chain of nursing homes, and got several buildings in 3 different states. And,
oh, wow.
And it kind of keeps me busy, but I enjoy working with the elderly.
That's awesome. So, you were on the podcast not too long ago, and you said that story on here, but I want you to say it again, kind of how you got your start in coon hunting. I think it's pretty cool.
Well,
how you got your start.
Well, when I was a young kid, I lived in a house, and it's so similar to where the red fern grows. Man, I mean, the first time I watched the movie where the red fern grows, I thought I was watching my own life.
Hmm.
I really did, because we lived in an area on a hill in a creek bottom. It was Moss's Creek bottom, and the creek uh, it wound around through the hills and hollers and stuff. And I remember laying in the bed at night, and we didn't have an air conditioner back then, and I had the windows open, and I could hear dogs running, and I could hear foxhounds. The first memory I had listening to foxhounds, and man, I was just captivated by listening to those foxhounds run, and I would try to imagine how I was could be with them. You know,
Hmm.
I'd heard stories, and I was thinking about, man, they're probably stopping to build a fire right now, and they're probably warming up, and I try to visualize what they were doing on that fox hunt. But then later on, I was in the bed one night, and the window was open, and I could hear dogs running, and sounded a little bit different. And I noticed that they weren't running as fast, and wasn't so many in the pack. And then all of a sudden, I could hear a dog stop, and it made a different bark. And and it wasn't long, that dog was, which I know now the dog was treed.
Yeah.
But I listened to that sound, and man, it just done something to me. And then I heard the rifle shoot, and then the dogs got quiet, and I knew that it was coon hunters, and they had shot the coon out. I'd had an uncle that had been coon hunting all his life, and he told me stories, and I'd always wanted to go coon hunting with him, and he'd always say he would one day, but he never did. Get me worked in, and
Yeah.
and then uh, and then about 6 months after that, listened to those dogs treat, and I listened to them several times. Uh, a buddy, my dad owned a little grocery store, and some guys came into the grocery store one day, and he said, "I want you to take him coon hunting." He said, "I want you to break him from wanting to go coon hunting." He said, "I'm tired of listening to it."
How
So
old were you?
I was I think about 15 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood,
Okay.
and 16. I was probably 15. I'd been hunting all my life. I'd squirrel hunted and done all kinds of stuff, and done one time. I remember squirrel hunting with a dog was really special. But anyway, when these guys come and pick me up, which have been lifelong friends ever since. But they picked me up in an old International Scout that didn't have a top on it, and they came to my dad's store, picked me up, and I'll never forget those dogs. I mean, the smell of those dogs, and the hounds. They were just, I could see their breath in the back of the the Scout, and I was sitting in the back with the dogs, and I was touching those dogs, and I could smell them, and I said, man, this just, I just knew there wasn't no doubt in my mind. Something about those dogs I loved. And then we went to the Hatchie River bottom in Pocahontas, Tennessee, where I was raised back then, and we turned those hounds loose down the edge of an old cornfield. It was dry. The corn was dry, but it's probably early fall or late summer,
Okay.
and and then those dogs opened up and they started running, and I that's the first time I'd been that close to a hound running, and then all of a sudden when they treed, oh my God, it just echoed the whole river bottom, and and when I walked up, it's like everything went in slow motion. Everything, it was just like a dream. I watched those hounds that I dreamed in my mind over and over again, and I watched those hounds as they jumped up the tree and throw their head back, and the steam was coming off their bodies, and man, I walked up, and I don't even remember looking up the tree bend, to be honest. I watched those dogs, and I just loved and rubbed on them, and I just couldn't wait. I wanted to put a dog leash on them. I just wanted to to lead one out of the woods. But those guys shot the raccoon out, and looking back on it, it was probably out of season. Because back then season didn't open up until October, November of the year,
Yeah.
and it was probably out of season. But I didn't know any better. But 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 that didn't the shooting the coon out didn't excite me near as much as watching those hounds. And and man, I got back and it kind of backfired on my dad because I got back and I told him, I said, Dad, I got to have a coon hound.
He was trying to deter you. He was.
Yeah, he was wanting to break me, but he created a monster in his own self, I believe. And then I coon hunted every night. I coon hunted every night. I'd go to school during the day and I'd coon hunt every night. I mean, I was hunting 5 or 6, 7 nights a week, and just anybody that come by my dad's store that had dogs, I would ask them, "Can I go coon hunting with you tonight?" And a lot of the older guys say, "Well, not tonight, maybe tomorrow night." And they just didn't want to fool with bringing me back home, or I didn't have a way to go. But somebody always, I'd find somebody to carry me coon hunting, and then I got started hunting with a friend of mine that's just a great friend of mine. He's been like a brother to me, Tommy McQueen. And Tommy McQueen later in life would own half of a very famous stud dog, uh, McQueen and Fergie's Wipeout Zach, the moose
Okay.
dog. And but Tommy had a couple of Walker dogs. I remember at that time he had a Walker dog named Mandy and a Walker dog named Blazer. And I asked him one night. I said, Tommy, what would you sell Blazer to me? And he looked at me. He said, Son, how in the world are you going to buy a dog? And I said, I'll worry about that. What do you take for him? He said, I guess I'd take $350. And I mean, to a kid, a young teenager, that's a lot. That was a huge amount of money.
Oh yeah.
And I started looking at how I was going to buy him. And I said, well, don't sell him. I said, I'm going to buy him. And he just kind of laughed. He kind of like, yeah, sure you are. And because he really didn't want to sell him. And I took and I started working. My dad, back in those days, Coke bottles, you could find Coke bottles and sell them for a nickel and 10 cents. And so I kind of got my dad owned the grocery store. So I kind of had a buyer for Coke bottles. So I would get out in the road ditches and ride around my bicycle and walk. And I'd find Coke bottles and I'd bring them in, clean them up and sell them to my dad. And he'd give me money and work for my dad. And I haul hay, I'd cut wood, I'd help fence, I'd do whatever the guys around the country there needed me to do. And then I slowly but surely I built up the money. And then I remember the day that I made the $350. And then I had it in my wallet, and my dad didn't know about it. And there again, kind of like where the red fern grows, And my dad didn't know I had the money, and I called Tommy's house phone and told him, I said, bring Blazer tonight. Let's go hunting. So he pulled down to my dad's store, and we got out, and I got my billfold out, and I said, here you go. And he said, what you got? And I said, I got the money for Blazer. And I went to get him out of the truck, and Tommy stood there and looked at the money, and he said, Jimmy, does your daddy know about this? And I said, my daddy didn't make that money.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but still. And I said, no. I said, my dad's okay with this. And I paid him for the dog, and man, I didn't even have a dog leash. I didn't have a collar. I didn't have anything. And I'll never forget, he stood there and he looked at me and he folded up $50 and he gave it back to me. And I said, what are you doing? He said, Jimmy, take this and buy you a lead and a collar for your dog. And I'll never forget, man, I looked up and Tommy's a big, tough guy, rough and tough kind of fella. And I looked and he had a tear running down his cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought about it at that time. I just, I didn't understand it. Didn't really care why he was crying. I just wanted my dog.
Yeah.
But when I got my dog, and I took that money, and the first ride I got to town, I went to a leather shop, a guy that sold Joey Dog Feed, Kenny Atkins in Bolivar. I got a ride to town, and I bought a dog leash, a collar, put my name on it, and I bought a leather hunting belt for a light.
Mm-hmm.
And the odd thing is about that is I didn't even own a light.
Yeah.
The only thing I had was a hand light, and I bought that light, and then later on I got somebody gave me an old wheat light head with a rheostat on it,
Okay.
and then I got a motorcycle battery that had acid in it, and
Mm-hmm.
I made me a holder and put on my belt, and I wore that for a while, and I'd charge it up with a battery charger, and the acid would leak out of it, and eat holes in the side of my blue jeans and my school pants, and my mother would get mad at me. And but the thing about that belt, I've got that belt now. It's hanging in my hunting room in my den,
That's cool.
and that belt's old, and I look at it, and over the years I've had to add pieces of leather to it, and it's got a lot of wear and stuff. But a lot of times when I want to reflect back on my hunting, I take that old belt and I look at it, and it takes me back to that night.
Mm-hmm. No, that's just an awesome story, and I remember you sharing part of that on this podcast, and then also part of it at that youth expo, and just about saving up, finding them Coke bottles and saving that money up and working hard. And I just think that's a great story and message, for anybody that's getting into this. It takes a lot of hard work and
Well,
dedication.
yeah, and it does, and I worked hard, and I took care of my dogs, and when I was young, and I wanted to learn every single thing that I could learn. I can remember driving or riding a school bus, and I would go by an elderly guy's house, and he had two great big blue tick hounds. I mean, they look like they weighed 150 pounds apiece, but I mean they were huge, big long ears and stuff. And I always wanted to go coon hunting with that elderly gentleman, but I never did. And before I knew it, he was dead and gone, and never got to coon hunt with him. But I always got to go by his house. But a lot of these guys took time with me, and they showed me the ropes. They showed me how to hunt a pup. They showed me what to look for, and how to pick a pup. And I'm not sure I perfected that just yet, but they showed me what to look for in a lot of things. How to doctor dogs. You learn a lot from these old timers. Some of it
Oh yeah.
you use, and some of it just it was their opinion and it didn't work for you. But
Mm-hmm.
excuse me. But a lot of things I've picked up and carried along the years that's really benefited me a lot.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it's been a good ride. I mean, it really has, and then I've got to. I've hunted with a lot of good people. I've hunted. I'm not able to hunt like I used to. I still hunt, but I hunt every night. That I hunt, 99% of the time I hunt by myself.
Okay.
And but I've hunted extremely hard. I've hunted 30 straight nights, take a night off, hunt 30 more straight nights, and and I've really been a hard hunter and enjoyed every bit of it. But
Now I know when we were talking, you said for a lot of those years that you were, especially when you were hunting real hard, and you had a pretty good line of walker dogs, right?
yeah, and I still hunt those line of dogs. And I met a guy, you know, back when I was about the same time that I uh, was starting out coon hunting. I went with my uncle uh, down to Mr. Winston there in Wimp Aaron. He
Mm-hmm.
passed away last year, and I listened to Mr. Wimp talk about dogs and how to breed dogs, and then I started thinking about, maybe I want to raise a litter of puppies some of these days. And I never was able, all those years that I owned the Blazer dog, I never was able to get him bred or to a female and have any puppies. I always wanted some for some reason. I just never did. But Mr. Wimp, when I talked to him, and he had the queen dogs, and it was just something about listening to him talking about raising a stock of dogs and a line of dogs, and talking about pedigrees and looking at those papers and stuff. It really caught my attention, and Mr. Wimp grew into a mentor of mine, and I hunted those dogs, and I still hunt them. I've got a female in my kennels now that goes back in that stock of dogs, and and boy, I've learned a lot from Mr. Wimp
Mm-hmm.
on dogs. I've hunted with him, and he taught me a lot about breeding dogs.
Yeah.
And I taught me how to study pedigrees and study and how to get fixed on a certain female in the line of dogs, and man, he was big on the females. He didn't really care. He had some really nice Walker stud dogs over the years. He had Schooner River Lipper, Schooner River, uh, uh, different dogs. He had all kinds of stud dogs. He had Schooner River Bart. But he just really he didn't really wasn't kind of even though he bred dogs and he had stud dogs, he wasn't a stud dog type of guy like James Merchant or any of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And or Joe House, he was a female type of guy,
Yeah.
and that was what his kennel full of was good females.
Mm-hmm. Now I've heard
And
that before. I've heard if you can get yourself a good line of females, you've got something.
yes, and that's what he did, and that's what the female I've got here at my house is a third generation out of his stock of dogs that I raised. I bought a female from him, a pup, or I raised her, and I bred her back to Bark and got a pup, and then well, matter of fact, it's the fourth generation, and then I got another pup, and I just kept going and kept going, and then the dog that I had, that this female's father, was the best male dog I've ever owned in my life.
Okay.
And then he died of cancer really early. He was a young dog, about 6 year old, and got cancer,
Mm,
and I had to put him down.
that's rough.
But I've learned a lot from these guys over the years, and man, they've taught me so much, and I'm so grateful to these guys. A lot of the guys I hunted with taught me things I didn't need to know. But for the most part, I learned something from every individual I ever hunted with.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And I'm trying to. I'm always looking for some young people to share that knowledge with, and to me, it's dying at a rapid pace,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm wanting to try to get young people involved and and get that's why I work so hard with the expo to try to get hounds into the right people's hands
Mm-hmm.
and to try to just keep the sport going, because I just feel like if I let it die, it's my fault.
Yeah.
So that's why I work so hard with these kids, and I try to keep them involved. And we're fixing to have a big coon hunt here in a few weeks. As soon as it warms up a little bit, and we're going to carry 20 or 30 kids out on a coon hunt and have a weenie roast. And
That I will say, you are brave.
yeah, well, I always have a lot of chaperones, and you have to be careful, because I'm telling you, you get a bunch of kids together, want to run off. I mean, in a heartbeat,
Oh yeah.
So I'm real peculiar and particular about where I go,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my coon hunts I carried, I had about 25 kids. I carried them on, And while I was talking to them and then teaching them how to build a fire, and I was doing it for the kids to teach the kids. Well, then I got to noticing then that their fathers didn't even know how to build a fire.
Yeah.
And the fathers were just as much or more interested in building and learning how to build a fire than the kids were.
Mm-hmm.
And and when I was talking to these kids, I done it on purpose and wanted to make a statement to them. And while I was talking to them, I reminded them. I said about 150 yards from where we're standing at right now, I almost drowned in 1982. And man, the kids got really quiet, and I told them about me coon hunting, and I said, I was trying to get to my dog through the backwater, and I was headstrong, and I had to get there one way or the other. And I said, I didn't realize that I was walking into a flooded creek, and then I walked off into a creek about 20 foot deep of water.
Oof.
And I said, and I told them all about the current and how it's important to stay out of the water and stuff. And and you can only hope you said something to maybe save a kid's life or an adult's life someday.
So what happened then?
It was on November the 22nd, and this is kind of odd because it was 22 degrees when we left home. It was November the 22nd, 1982, and me and a friend of mine, we were going coon hunting, and we went down this big river bottom, and the dog turned. We had two English females back in. It's the only English female I had up until the last year or so. And we turned the hounds loose, and we immediately started walking. We saw the backwater was out, and my friend Jimmy, he said, "We need to catch these dogs. We can't. They're going to get out of pocket in this water." Well, it didn't take long; they were out of pocket, and man, I don't know how they got to where they got, but they were probably 600-700 yards from where we were at. And when I was a young man, 18, I was probably about 18. No, I was older than that. I was about 18, 19-year-old, something in that neighborhood. And I, being a proud young man, I said, I'm going to get my dog.
Mm-hmm.
And they were treed, and he said, well, I'm going to build a fire. And he said, you go ahead. I'll be waiting on you when you get back. He said, I'm not going. And so I started walking into the water, and I got a little deeper. Next thing I knowed, it was up over my knee, and then it was over my hip boots. And I kept thinking, well, I'll walk it just a little further, and then I'll come out on a higher ground, and then the dogs, I'll be on drier ground, I can get to them. Well, water got up about waist deep, and then when it got up about waist deep, I had a sunburst eagle light on, and I started trying to pull the eagle light up under my armpit, get a little higher up out of the water. And the last thing I remember before I went down, I looked, and when I shined my light down, I saw the water swirling. And almost the instant I saw the water was swirling, and I thought in my mind that I better be careful. That's moving water. And just about time I thought that in my mind, both feet flew out from under me, and I went straight down. Mm. And I went down in the water, and I started splashing, and I come back up, and the current was catching me, and I had a pair of hip boots on that I'd bought back in those days. It had a drawstring at the top, believe it or not.
Okay.
And those boots had filled up with water and making my legs heavy.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not a big swimmer anyway. But I came up to the top of the water, and I yelled, tried to yell as best I could. Mm-hmm. And I was splashing this water, and then the current took me back down again. And I remember when I went back down again, I said, I've got to do something. Now, I remember thinking on the way back up, I said that, and in my mind, I'm thinking, this river, I'm going to die. and this creek is going to carry me out to the main river, and this main river will carry me so far, and they may not ever find me. And I mean, all this is going through my mind, you know.
Oh yeah.
And then I came up for the second time, and I tried to yell, and I had too much water, and all I could do was just kind of make a gurgle sound. And when I come up for the third time, I'd always heard if you come up at third time, it's it. And when my head come above the water that third time, I tried to take a breath in, and I remember I couldn't take a breath in.
Mm.
And then I started down in the water. And when I started floating in that water, it's just like everything comes calm. I mean, it's just like a peace come over me. In the water, I couldn't feel the current anymore, and my headlight had come off my helmet had come off my head, and I could see it on my chest, and the light was shining in front of me, and I could see my leg, and I could see my hand floating. And I remember looking at my hand, and it was just lifeless. I could see my right hand. Or, I've always told people I thought it was my right hand. It might have been the hand of God. I don't know. But I saw a hand coming down in front of me, and I remember looking at that hand, just thinking, I said, that's just so weird. And all this stuff's going through my mind. It seemed like it was an eternity.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And then all of a sudden, something told me, said, well, you don't have to die here. And when that thought come through my mind, I had a 22 Browning rifle on an Army surplus Army rifle sling, and it had twisted around my left elbow. And when I hit the ground, I hit the bottom of the creek, the rifle bumped up against me, and I realized I had that rifle, and I took that rifle barrel, and I turned around, and I started sticking that rifle barrel in the ground and started pulling. And then I pulled up, and I felt a bank in front of me, and I used that rifle barrel stick, and I pushed up, and I started going up pretty fast. And when I shot up out of the water, and there was a tree. And I had just enough energy to grab that sapling tree, and I pulled myself up on the bank, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe in. I couldn't breathe out. I was just I don't know how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stood up, and I stood up enough to get up my head up out of the water. And then I stood up, and then I started trying. I couldn't breathe in, and then all of a sudden the water started spraying out of my mouth and my nose, and it just started spraying out. And then I was like regurgitating the water and stuff. And then I remember the first breath that I was able to take in, it felt like fire coals when it hit my lungs.
Mm.
And then I got my breath, and I finally I couldn't yell for help, and I stood there for a long time, and I finally was able to stand up, and I lost my glasses. I couldn't see. But I remember making a step, and I didn't remember where I had come up out of the creek, out of the water. So I didn't know whether I made it to go behind me, but in front of me, to the left or the right. I knew if I made one more step, I'd never make it out.
Yeah.
If I went back in the creek. And I remember looking out, I could see far enough to see sage grass. And I'd always been told by old timers that when you're in a river bottom, when you're in water, you see sage grass, you know you're getting close to a field because sage grass don't grow in a river bottom. And then all that memory, that training, these old timers had told me that I saw that sage grass, and I walked toward that sage grass. I made one step, and it was on ground. And then I kept watching that sage grass, and I kept walking towards the sage grass until I come out in an old grown-up field.
Yeah.
And then when I come out of that grown-up field, I remember just praising God because I could see the skyline. And I started walking out, and then I walked about 150 yards, and I realized I only had one boot on. And then I kept walking. I was barefooted, and I was walking through a briar thicket, but I never felt I never felt the briars. I never felt any sticks or never felt anything like that. And I came out to the old road that went out to the bottom, and I could see the fire burning. And then I walked up to my buddy sitting there, and when I walked up, he started screaming. I mean, because I could probably look like they had warmed over. I mean, I
I'm
had
sure
one
you
boot,
did.
boot, my light hanging over my shoulder, water in the head of it, dancing around, and one boot on, barefooted.
Yeah.
And he started screaming, and he went to throwing wood on the fire. And then, and like I said, by that time it was probably down in the teens because, like I said, it was 22 when we left home,
Mm-hmm.
and it was probably down in the teens by that time. And then I look. He said I was in shock, and then we took off running. He started pushing and pulling me when we got to the pickup truck, and for some reason that night I had carried an extra pair of brown Carhartt coveralls. And I never wore them, no matter how cold it was. I always just wore my Carhartt bibs and my jacket. That's all I ever wore.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I carried those Carhartt coveralls, and I pulled off all my clothes, put the coveralls on, and he cranked his truck up and got the heat going. And then I made it out.
Yeah.
Long story short, I made it out and I survived it. But I still, I went back a year later to the date, and I was talking to my dad one day, and I said, "Dad, I got to go back and see where I was at." I said, I gotta face it. I got to go back and see it."
Mm-hmm.
So I went back, and same time of year, just wasn't no water, and I walked down through the river bottom, and I went and I rewalked the steps, walked out to the end of the growed up field, walked out through the woods, walked up, and then I realized I'd walked off in the Hatchie Creek. And like I said, the bank was about 20 foot down, 15, 20 foot down. And considering it had 4 or 5 foot of water above that, so that's how deep of water I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was standing there looking at it, thinking about it, reliving that moment, I looked down and I saw something. And I walked down the creek bank and looked, and there was my hip boot had got wedged in a bush and was still there a year later.
Wow.
And that was very eye opening, to think how blessed I was to be able to survive that. And
Yep.
but anyway, that's why I try to teach these kids, and every time I carry kids hunting, I'm always stressing that fact about water. Don't get in that water. Stay away from that water.
Yep. Now, actually, the podcast is gonna air tomorrow. That's kind of how it starts out. Guy got in. They were walking on some marsh grass, and they stopped to listen. And all of a sudden, they started sinking. It was kind of had frozen. The mud had kind of frozen while they
Oh
were
yeah.
moving on it. They were staying on top of it. As soon as they stopped, they started sinking, and by the time they got back to the bank, they were about up to their neck in thick mud and water. Conkey's Outdoors is proud to be a sponsor of Tree Talking Time. Family, hunting, tradition is the Conkey's motto. They understand the importance of passing down the tradition of hound hunting. They are a family-owned business that treats you like family. They also understand the importance of having the gear you need when you need it. Conkey's carries everything for your next hunt, and it ships to your door quick. They also offer great warranties on all tracking systems and financing options. Check them out at conkeys.com. You can also use the code TreeTalkingTime5 in all caps to save as well.
Oh yeah, and I mean, in situations like that, you can get into some danger coon hunting or any kind of hunting. But that's why I've always tried to teach people to build a fire, how to build a fire in an emergency. And because my buddy had a fire that night, but I've been by myself before to where or somebody else got wet. Not nearly drowned, but got wet, and they were really cold and have to build a fire. And when you're panicking and stuff, it's hard to think straight. So, but if you practice that as you go with stuff, and it's just like the night here one night, the last night I went hunting. I guess it was Saturday night. I was hunting, and I didn't realize that the ice was still so thick in the bottom. And I was hunting my pup, my English pup, and he was just running around. I mean, looking for a coon, and and they were kind of laid up, and man, he was running. And I seen him run out on some ice, and when I realized it was ice, I kind of got scared because a lot of people don't understand that you walk on that ice, and or dog walks on it, you break through, and they go over 3 foot. And if they don't find that exact same hole, or you don't, you're going to drown.
Yep.
And because there's no way you can exert enough energy in thick ice to bust it from while you're drowning.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, and a dog surely don't know how to come up through. And if they can't find that hole, they'll drown. And thank goodness he got treed, and I was able to catch him and get him out of there. But but it really bothered me. I hadn't even thought about the ice not being melted by then, but it. And a lot of things. I've been coon hunting and break through ice and cut my hip boot and cut my leg and.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of dangers out in these woods. And I try to run scenarios in my mind, especially when I'm by myself. What if this happens?
Mm-hmm.
And I try to be prepared. You just never know.
That's for sure.
And another thing, with teaching these kids how to read a compass. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
gosh, that's something. I don't know a lot of. I've hunted with a lot of people and stuff, and we turn around and we start back toward the truck, and they said, "You check your compass?" And I said, "No, I didn't check my compass." I said, "How do you know which way you're going?" And it's just something that you learn. When I'm walking into a tree, I'm constantly breaking over twigs. I break over twigs all the way to the tree,
Mm-hmm.
and I break a limb on the side of a tree, and I bend it toward the tree. And I don't even realize I'm doing it. I've had people ask me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. What was I doing?" They said, "You were breaking sticks." And I've done it so long, I just walk and I break a stick, and I always push it toward the tree. And then when I'm coming out, if I find, if I found out that I've ever, when I've been lost before, my compass mess up or lose my compass or whatever, if I ever find that trail of sticks or twigs or limbs broken, I can usually backtrack confirm I'm going the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But you just pick up on things like that over the years. Like I said before, those old timers taught me a lot of things that stuck with me over the years.
Now, obviously, this is just an audio podcast, and there's a lot you can't really teach over that. But you got any other advice that they ever told you that you think would be relevant to people listening?
Well, the thing that took me a while to understand about these old timers, I wanted to do things fast. I wanted the quickest result. I wanted to train the dog in the quickest result. And a lot of these old timers would tell me, said some dogs are like people; they learn a little slower. And like I've hunted this stock of dogs I talked about earlier, and most of the time, by the time they're a year old, if they weren't trained, then I was giving them to a kid or doing something with them. I mean, they couldn't stay at my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got I learned over the years that some dogs are just like people. They have to get things worked out in their own mind. And, not every student goes to school and excels at the same rate as other kids. And, even though they've got natural ability, just like my Eddie Ray pup, I'd hunted him. He was about a year old, a little over a year old, never looked up a tree. And I was really, really getting frustrated with him. And I thought about what these old timers would tell me. And I just kept hunting, and people were sending me messages. Why do you keep on hunting this pup? Why you keep on? You see something in him that everybody else don't see. And the thing about it is, man, that when I looked at him, old timers always told me that you find a dog that looks you in your eyes and looks into your soul, and he's going to make you a good one. And it's something that I noticed from this pup from day one. He would look at me, and he would look into my eyes, and it would just seem like if he could read plumb into my soul. I mean, it was something special, and I've had a couple of dogs that I've done that with, but it didn't mean as much to me. But I'm older now, and I'm kind of wanting my last hoorah dog, and looking for that last good dog, and I thought about what these old timers told me about a dog looking you in the eye, and I thought about being patient and what they told me, and I just kept waiting and kept waiting and kept waiting and kept hunting, and man, and then when it happened, it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I hunted him right by himself, until he started. I never hunted him with another dog, but maybe 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
He did every bit of it by himself, and I thought about what these old guys had told me, and and I thought about, they always told me, Ben, I don't know if you ever heard that. You have a dog in this part of the country. It's true anyway. You have a dog tree up a pine tree, you can bet your money the coon is there.
I've never
And
heard that.
yeah, and I never thought about that for a long time. And then in the years past, I got to thinking. I said, well, just how many times have you had? Because there's pine trees everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how many times have you even treed up a pine tree? And I got to thinking one night. I said, I bet I can't think of maybe 2 or 3 trees in all these years I've been coon hunting that the dogs have even treed up a pine tree. And then I got to thinking about those locations, and I got to thinking, I said, every time I've ever treed in a pine tree, I found the coon. He was hard to find, but I found the coon, and he was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that today. If I'm with my grandkids or whatever, we're hunting in these river bottoms, and every once in a while you'll find a stray pine tree just out in the middle of nowhere. Don't know why that pine tree is growing there, but it's there. And these dogs, and I've had dogs tree, and I tell these grandsons and my son and stuff, well, you can bet, you can bank on him, he's there. And man, it's just little things like that. These old timers that I didn't put a lot of merit in when they were telling me this. I was thinking, a coon don't know the difference between a pine tree and an oak tree. But I got to thinking about that, and then I got, and then I got to looking back over my life and hunts that I've had, and around here, I've never treed a very many times up a pine tree, but when I did, the coon was there.
Honestly, the only place I can ever think of where I've ever treed in one is this one place, but it's full of planted pines or hemlocks or I don't know, some sort of evergreen trees. But the whole place, that's what the whole place is. There's a little hardwood stand on your way in, but then you get past that hardwood stand, that's all that's all it is. So you tree a bunch in there, but other than that, I've never treed in an evergreen tree anywhere else.
And when you never think about things like that until one day, you like me, you're sitting on a log by yourself down the river bottom, and you go to putting 2 and 2 together, and you say, "Dang, that now I understand." And I had old timers tell me before, you tree up a cedar tree, you may not ever find it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd ask them, the old guys, I said, "Why is that?" They said he'll pull those cedar limbs up around him.
Oh yeah.
Said he'll pull them around him with his hands, and said you'll never see them. And I've done that before, and tree coons in a squirrel nest in a cedar tree, never see it, or I just barely see an eye and never see the body of the coon, and it'll be up a 20-foot cedar tree, but you never see the coon because he's pulled the limbs up and just water them around himself.
Yep.
And people don't think that these these coons have enough intelligence to do things like that.
They're not stupid, that's for sure.
And I had a hunting buddy that was crippled, and me and him was hunting buddies for about 25, 30 years, and he was crippled. And I helped him to the truck in the wheelchair, and helped him back in the house when he got home. And I hunted, like I said, I hunted by myself a lot, but he would go, and it just felt good to have somebody in the truck to kind of toot the horn and give you a secondary opinion on the direction you're going, or drive around, pick you up, and stuff like that. And he said he was sitting in the truck one night on a moonlit night, and the dogs were running the hounds, and they kept coming back out to the blacktop road that he was sitting on. They would go the same direction. They'd make a lose, and then he'd see the dogs running down the blacktop road, and then they'd pick the track up again. And he said he couldn't figure out what was going on. And he told me, he said, Jimmy, I saw this with my own eyes. He said, I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw the coon cross the road in the moonlight. He said he crossed the road, and then I heard something. He said, I looked out the window of my truck, and there was a net wire fence. And he said that coon would come through that fence, go down about 6 or 8 foot, go back through the fence, and then he would go 6 or 8, 10 foot, come back through the fence, and said he would weave all the way up and down that fence. And he said I've never seen it. And then the coon would come back across the road. And man, I've run into things like that before, and to me, I just smile, and think about it. This, a lot of people think they're just dumb, ignorant critters.
Yep.
And some of them are, but some of them are educated.
And then we think we have them dumb, idiot dogs that can't figure things out when they're pulling tricks like that.
Yes, and I mean, and I had an old timer one time said, "You ever been running a track and then the dogs just make a loss and they're just running wide open and you just can't, and they're just boogalooing and they can't work it out, and they can't figure out what's going on, and then finally after a while they go on and get started back up again, and I told them, yeah, I've had that happen before. And they said those old coons will be running. An old educated coon said he'll be running, and then he'll start dragging his back feet, and said then he'll start raking up leaves and stuff, making a scent pile. And he said if he's got enough time, he'll make him a big scent pile. And then after he does that, then he'll go on out the other side, and then gives him some time to gain some ground on those dogs.
Yeah.
And when I thought about that, and I said, well, I don't know about I don't know about that. I don't think our coon's got that much sense to do something like that until you see a coon do it. And then and you see where a coon has done that and drug up leaves in a pile, and I'm sure urinated and whatever else all over it. And then the dogs are just, I've walked up, they'd be close to the dogs when that happened, and walk up and they're just standing there smelling of the ground, looking around, and you can see leaves piled up everywhere, and the dogs just finally figure it out. And sometimes they don't ever figure it out. And a lot of people don't. The thing that I believe the reason why we don't see a lot of that now, being especially in my part of the country and the dogs that we hunt now, is a lot of what we have now is hot-nosed dogs.
Yeah.
And they just go through the country looking for the hottest coon they can find.
Yep.
And most of the time it's about 15 or 20 foot from the tree. You hear a short race and then they tree. And but back when I started, years ago, people would blame it and say that we just had dogs that couldn't run a track. But we did have dogs that could run a track, but they could smell tracks that were a lot colder than what the dogs run nowadays.
Yeah. No,
and
I think a fair assessment of coonhounds today.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, and I've got dogs now that can just blow in there. Man, they sound good, and you say, man, that's some track driving fools. And I know when I'm sitting there listening to them, said, no, they just finally run up on one red hot.
Hmm.
Is what they're doing. And then I've got a dog that I know this colder track, and you know, and and a lot of times when you got a cold track dog like that, the other dogs will just blow through the country and just leave them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they can't smell what he's after or she's after, so they just blow through the country to find something hot, and then if you cold track dogs stand with a track, then people get the wrong impressions, and they wouldn't hunt a dog like that
Hmm.
uh, because you know they think he's boogalooing around on the track and all this stuff, and then you know, in reality, on an old cold night when the coons are not really stirring, that dog is a premier dog.
Yep, that's the truth.
But there's a lot of things that you know you glean over the years, and a lot of stuff that just didn't work out for me. A lot of ideas people had that didn't work out for me, and they might have worked for them. I just didn't never catch on to it, and but I've been blessed. I've really been blessed
Hmm.
over the years.
So you said you've hunted this line of Walker dogs for a lot of years, but you've had some other dogs, and you've mentioned some English dogs too. And so, what do you have now?
I've got two dogs out here. I've got two half brothers. I, I started when my older female started. I've got two older Walker females down here. One of them is wipeout bred, which you know I love wipeout bred dogs. Uh, most of the ones that got out, I'm a little too slow and old to keep up with them. But she's like me; she's slow and old. And then I got my other Schooner River female. Those are my old dogs. And then I've got a Gold Rush dog that I bought from Mr. Bowen. He's a 4 year old dog, and I hunt him. I can hunt him in a pack with other dogs, but he's just not a big hunter by itself.
Hmm.
So I've got those in the kennel, and then I started reading up and started kind of researching stuff, and I started looking at Mr. Murray Reagan's dog, the Hatchie River. You know, my kennel name is Hatchie River, and his kennel name is Hatchie River, but I was Hatchie River Tree and Walkers, and his was Hatchie River English dog.
Hmm.
And I started researching and started keeping up and going back to what we said about the females. I started looking back at the old Dottie female and all the females in the Hall of Fame and stuff. And I got to thinking about. I started looking at Murray's frame of mind, and I noticed the same thing that Wimp was doing. I said he's concentrating on these females, and and then I started looking at the dogs that they were reproducing, and those dogs were reproducing. So I reached out to Murray and I asked him. I said, Murray, I said I'm looking for a pup, and and he said Peanut Scott's got a English male pup, nice pup. He said he may sell him. And I called Mr. Peanut Scott. Never met him before in my life. Talked to him. He said, yes, I got one. So I went and met him, looked at the pup, and like I said, when he little pup, he was about 5 or 6 months old when I got him. Never had been fooled with him. Just a big old gawky pup. And when I went to get him out of the back of his truck to put him in mine, the first thing I noticed, I said he looked me straight in the eyes.
Hmm.
You know, most pups when they're scared, been hauled, and you know hadn't been hauled much, and all they're looking for is to get on the ground, do something. But when he stopped and looked me in the eyes, I started making a relationship with him,
Hmm.
and then I got him home and started fooling with him. And like I said, I've talked about him, and now he's a good young dog. He's a little over a year and a half old. He's treated several coons, And when he trees, he's got the meat most of the time, or he's got a den tree or something that's got a head full of scents. And what I like about him, he road hunts, and then to me that fits in. I mean, I've never cached him from a truck, but I hunt him off 4-wheeler side by side,
Mm-hmm.
and he loves to road hunt. I mean, I can ride through these big river bottoms, and he's just casting in front of me left and right, and just a pleasure for somebody like me to hunt with. He don't burn through the country 2 or 3 miles, and I have to look him up and cross creeks to get to him and all that stuff. He hunts out 300 to 400 yards, but he hunts with me. He's got intelligence.
Yep.
And then I started thinking about the female dog, the Lily dog. A friend of mine, Ryan Morris, that owns the Lily dog, the mother of Eddie Ray. He bred him to the blood dog, English dog, and he's a top reproducer. And I talked to Ryan, and I got a male pup out of him, which is a half brother to Eddie Ray, same mother,
Okay.
different father, and he's got the same characteristics.
Nice.
I mean, he's got the same characteristics, and you know that that Eddie Ray had, and even though the sniper dog done his part of reproducing, that's the stud dog that Murray and Peanut own together. Is the sniper dog.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's put his part into the blood of the dogs, I see the female through both pups.
Yeah.
And I see that I keep on referring back to the eye look. It comes from the female because both of these pups do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They've got almost an identical mouth. They've got some of the same characteristics, and so that I'm really excited about it. And then I bought an English female at the St. Jude Hunt back in April. I'm going to butcher the young man's name, but it's Justin Hoffmeister, I believe is his name.
Okay.
He's got his own line of English dogs up Midwest that are doing really well, winning a lot of hunts.
Nice.
And I like this little female. She's young and hadn't been hunted. Me hunting with Eddie Ray, I hadn't had a chance to hunt her like I should, but I've hunted her and she's just a crackerjack squirrel dog. I mean, she's a good squirrel dog.
Nice. There you go.
So I really doesn't, as far as what I want her for, it really doesn't matter. I mean, she trees coons and hunts and does all that stuff, but I'm just looking maybe in the future, maybe hunting English dogs, and I still always have my Schooner River line to fall back on, and just trying to try something new. I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to be colorblind,
Mm-hmm. Now I know you've had squirrel dogs before. Do you have any now?
Yes, I've got a squirrel dog. A friend of mine, Rod Hardy, does a lot of competition hunting, trains dogs and stuff, and does a lot of NSD hunting and stuff. Used to hunting a lot of mountain cur hunts and stuff. And I called him and asked him about a dog. I told him I was looking for a dog, and I said I want a good dog. And he told me about a guy that down in Arkansas, the lower part of Arkansas, right on the Texas border. Told me had a squirrel dog. Said she's going to be a nice squirrel dog, Jimmy. And I had in my mind and vision of a mountain cur. That's what I thought I was. And he sent me a video of her, just a young dog, and it was a tree and walker. And I said, "Oh, Rod," I said, I don't know about this now. And he said, "Mr. Jimmy," he said, "I promise you, she's going to be a nice squirrel dog." And I went down. Me and my wife went down, carried a chunk of change down there, and Mr. Gilmer is his name. Gilmer is his last name. I can't remember his first name. But he owned a lot of world champion squirrel dogs over the years, the Gunsmoke dog and different dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And and I didn't know that when I went down there, and I talked to him and bought the female, never hunted with her or anything, brought her back home, and she's if you didn't know it when you turn her loose, you would think you was hunting a cur dog.
Okay.
I mean, she never opens on the ground. She might bark on a real hot squirrel about 10 foot from the tree, and then, but she never trails one on the ground. And an absolute good tree dog. And she'll tree a squirrel, and then the instant you shoot it out, or you can call her off, send her on if it's in a den, and she'll hunt out just like a cur dog. She'll cover the mountaintops, the hilltops, the creek bottoms, whatever. And
Nice.
she just an awesome little squirrel dog.
Very nice.
But she's been a pleasure. I've carried kids with her hunting, and man, shot out a bunch of squirrels, and
Mm-hmm.
and she'll tree coon. She's tree some coon during the daytime, but I've never coon hunted her because there again, the old timers told me, said, Mr. Jimmy, you better not coon hunt that female, or she'll get to liking coons, and
Yep.
and she won't treat squirrels like she was. So I took their advice, and I don't care coon hunting.
There you
But
go.
she has treed some laid up during the daytime, and I shot a couple out, but I'm kind of backing off of that because because I don't want to get in the habit of wanting to do that during the daytime.
Mm-hmm. I understand. So.
But she's a nice little female. I've got some decent dogs, and like I got these young dogs, and my old dogs are not getting hunted, but they've been hunted hard. They're not. I think they're like in the warm kennels and the feeders. But these younger dogs, I love hunting these young dogs and just taking them out and watching them and learning them and them learning me and man, it's just something exciting about hearing them pups tree for the first time out by themselves.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But we're fixing to start school, and then I went back, and it's kind of odd. We talk about my first good dog, and when I went to Ryan, I picked up this little English pup, and I got home. I told my wife, I said, I'm going to name him the first good dog I ever owned. So I named him Trailblazer, which is the name of the dog I bought from Tommy McQueen those many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, this may be the one closes me out right here. So I'm going to rename him the first dog I had that was any good,
I don't know. I think you
So,
can keep if you keep on trucking. I think you might need another one or two.
oh yeah, I hope so. I mean, I've had a knee replacement, and when I had it, it was kind of scary, and man, I had it done 2 years ago this year, or 2 years ago, the 27th of this month, matter of fact, and I went to the doctor in April, follow up, and I asked the surgeon, I said, what can I do? And he said, well, anything you feel like you can do. And I come home that night, put my overalls on, got my light, and my wife said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going coon hunting. So, with eyes, you just have to be careful. When you got one knee that's not all your knee, it was man made. You just have
Yep.
to kind of be careful with it and stuff. But I fell Saturday night. Got tangled up in a briar bush and fell, and hey, I jumped right up, kept on trucking.
Good deal.
But like I said, I'm still, I guess, for a 62-year-old man, I guess I'm pretty tough. I still go several nights a week by myself.
Yep. No, I'd say you are. That's for sure. So, well, before we close this out, I just want to give you the opportunity to give an update on next year's Hatchie River Youth Expo if you have one. I know it's only been about a month, but I know the last time we talked, you already had the wheels were in motion already for next year. So
Oh yeah, we've got there's so many things that we're going to do, and we're going to make it a little longer, probably a whole day up into a later evening event.
Hmm.
And the things we're knocking around right now is we're going to have a uh, a buck contest for a kid, a youth, anybody 16 and under that has taken a buck in the year in the 2024 2025 hunting season can bring it, and we're going to have people there to score the bucks, and
Hmm.
whoever has the highest scoring buck uh, will be, we'll have awards for that.
Nice.
And then we're going to have Mr. Parrish Elliott that makes these custom turkey calls. We've got him booked to come back. He's going to come make it to the event and have some more custom calls and stuff. And then we're going to have a turkey calling contest uh, to where we'll have some trophies, some big trophies to give away, and give away a custom call to our winners of that. So we're going to have a panel of people to judge that call, and then we're going to have a duck calling contest for youth. We have different age uh, divisions and stuff. And we're just going to about to build off the last year. I want to try
Hmm.
to get hunting dogs in people's hands, and I want to start a little earlier. And I've already got people wanting to donate dogs and in the future, and so it's something I want to build on that and try to get hunting dogs into the works. And I'm working on the article for Full Cry. I've written several articles for Full Cry and Coonhound Bloodline, and
Hmm.
so I'm getting that ready to send in to Miss Dewey to get that printed in the next few months. So
Nice.
it'll have a lot of pictures of the hunt and stuff, and hopefully promote, and build out. We've had, I don't know if you heard the people. I've had people come to me and Anthony at the event and ask us to come to Alabama and East Tennessee and
Wow.
put on these events, and I try to explain to them, now we'll work with you to try to help you do anything that you need, but we're not in this for profit and to travel
Yeah.
and to do stuff. We're just trying to do it for the kids, but I definitely want to help them, and I am assisting people in doing that. But to get back to the hunt, we really got a lot of stuff planned and ideas and just knocked around, and we're going to have more door prizes and um, just try to really build and tweak, and anything that we didn't do so well this last event, we're going to change it around and try to make this next one even bigger and better.
That's awesome. I know I said it on the last one, but my son enjoyed it very much. So I personally have to say thank you for it. Um, he had a blast, and he's like, I want to go next year. I'm like, bud, it's not around the corner from our house. That's 14 hours.
Well, we loved having you. I mean, it's really, it really touched our heart for you to be there and support us and stuff. And but man, I hope that you can make it. Really do. I mean, it's a it's a touching experience. It really was. I mean, to see that many people show up
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and be involved and stuff, and this. But I'll keep you in the loop on this big coon hunt we're going to be having in the next few weeks.
Yeah. I look
And
forward to
another
seeing about it.
thing, yeah, and another thing, Ben, that we're going to do, and I forgot about this. We're going to have blood tracking. We're going to have a guy that trains blood tracking dogs. He's going to come and give a demo to kids that may want to get involved in that in the future, training dogs to track down wounded deer.
Hmm.
And then also we're going to have a guy that runs a drone service. It's a big thing in our area right now.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, one of these drone services just found a missing elderly guy that had been missing for over a day in the cold weather.
Oh, wow.
And man, that's a big thing right now. These drones are finding these
Hmm.
deer that people couldn't have found any other way.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's going to come and do a demo, and then I think Chris Deming and his brother they've already signed up. They're going to go down and take the kids on this little creek there at the property and show them how to physically set traps and do that kind of stuff, do some hands-on stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
So it's going to be a cool event. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sure this event will continue to get bigger and better until you just can't do any more where you're at. So,
well, I've had a lot of people that's done on events like this, and I've had people call me and told me, said, you may get one more event at the venue you got now, but the next year you might be looking for a bigger building.
I think so.
And I hope so. I really do.
But well, I really appreciate you coming on, Mr. Jimmy. I've enjoyed this very much. I think you've given us a lot of good little nuggets here and a lot of insights, and I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir, Ben. Anytime you need me, just give me a call, buddy.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Tree Talking Media. And until next time, keep 'em talking in the timber.